I am Anne Farnsworth-Alvear. Welcome to the Penn for Pilots press conference that we're holding today via Zoom. Today is September 22nd, 2020. I am here with Roger Smith, Vivan Gadsden, and Gerald Campano. We are here today because school children in Philadelphia face a terrible funding shortfall. We believe that it is the responsibility of our institution to begin to be part of that being addressed in this city. Inadequate resources for public education are damaging our city. Public schools depend on property taxes. The University of Pennsylvania is one of the city's wealthiest private property owners, and that distinction means that our university has a responsibility to the future. It has a responsibility to education in this city. We want to be part of our institution shouldering that responsibility. That's why we're here today. Let's be clear. We want to see Penn step up and begin to pay pilots. And when we talk about pilots, we have a specific goal in mind. We would like to see the University of Pennsylvania pay 40% of what it would owe in property taxes. We, this summer, gathered 1,000 signatures of staff and faculty around the University of Pennsylvania. 1,000 people who signed a petition asking for the institution to open the question of pilots. After that, 68 faculty and staff sent individual letters to the trustees asking them to meet with us. 6 weeks out from that, we have not heard back. We're very concerned about the refusal to dialogue. We were also here very specifically because this Thursday, September 24th, the Budget and Finance Committee of our Board of Trustees is meeting. Their meetings are available. The public can log in and listen. At 10 a.m., I believe the agenda will be posted. We will be listening. We hope that the Budget and Finance Committee meeting this Thursday will be an opportunity for the university to reverse the position that was stated this summer. And now what we need is to see if our voices have been heard. Two of the people on the call hail from Arts and Sciences. That's myself and Dr. Smith. Two of the people on the call, Drs. Campano and Gadsden, hail from the School of Education, and that may be helpful as we continue our conversation. Rogers, I'd like to ask you to kick us off, and thank you to everybody for coming.
Thank you, Anne, and I also want to thank everybody for being here. I want to start by acknowledging that the COVID-19 crisis is presenting major challenges to Penn and to the whole higher education sector. Penn has a hiring freeze. It's not going to be admitting graduate students next year. We face other cuts, and other institutions of higher education are being harder hit. Some may have to close. That is partly because the higher education sector has been in deepening trouble for some time. Not Penn, but higher education overall has suffered from declining public support out of a growing perception that higher education isn't contributing enough to the people of their communities and their country. And here at Penn, we face the strange paradox that our status as a leading institution has been made possible in part by our exemption from the property tax system that is a major barrier to the improvement of public education in this school. We don't pay taxes, and property taxes are the main source of public school funding and are often dramatically insufficient. Why do we have that exemption? It is primarily because we are thought to contribute not only to the education of our students, but to the advancement of the educational goals of our city and our state. And in this time of crisis, I think we have to reflect on how we can fulfill that mission more fully than we have done in the past, how we can become more of a partner with our whole educational system. And I think the best way to do that is to reconsider some of the priorities that we have followed. Now, Penn does do a lot to assist education in many ways. I've been involved in educational outreach efforts in the city, so has everybody involved in this conversation. But we all know that those efforts are not sufficient to help bring about the systemic changes we need to improve public education. And precisely because Penn is a great leading educational institution, the leading educational institution in the city, we can and should signal our commitment to systemic improvement of public education by making payments in lieu of those property taxes that we are exempt from paying. By doing so, we will show that we're not only committed to improving education for our students, we're committed to improving education for all.
Thank you, Rogers. I appreciate so much your kicking off the conversation. I'm going to invite Dr. Gadsden to come in now.
Thank you, Anne, and also thank you, Rogers. I think you laid out a very nice big picture. I come to this, of course, very concerned about public education, and I teach in a school of education, and so this issue is squarely rooted in the work that I do. I think that in every way imaginable, this current situation around pilots should make us consider the commentary that has been made so often in recent months, which is that we are all in this together. And if that is in fact the case, then I think we as a well-funded institution, even with some of the crises that Rogers noted, must take that seriously. These are issues to be overcome, to be addressed, not to have us succumb to them. But given the history of inequality in Philadelphia, the challenges around educational equity, and a number of other issues, the question of what is Penn's fair share is an empirical question in and of itself, right? But it is a question that can be answered. As I said before, there are these multiple commentaries that have pointed to the complexity of Penn's relationship with the city and of the city's tax system. And I appreciate all of the emails that I've gotten from various people who have attempted to educate me even more about these complexities. But I have been equally perplexed by the failure to act on pilots, to try to uncouple some of those complexities, to promote education and well-being for children and families throughout our school district. You know, there's an intellectual argument to be made for pilots, which sits with the very ideals of the University of Pennsylvania around that highlight the goals of democracy, something that hangs in the balance even as we meet here today. But it's something that we take seriously within a school of education, the whole idea of a democratic education. And what in fact are we educating children for if we are allowing them to go into unsafe buildings, buildings that have asbestos or lead paint? If we are challenging their teachers to teach in ways that can be affirming for students, but they don't have the minimal facilities to be able to do that. I also think that there's a kind of social responsibility argument. And that argument sits with what I consider the incredible brain trust and financial wealth of our university, that together should lead to some solution. I also want to talk about the moral stance, which I find to be aligned with the idea that as an institution, we want to stake our claim to creating a just society and being a model for others and for actions that lead to change. Of course, Penn is not the only university in Philadelphia that has failed to accept pilots, but it's our university. It's the place where we come to work, and it's the place where we have invested an enormous amount of our time. I know I have lived in my office much more than I have lived at home at different points. It is a place that I have trusted to take the banner of racial justice seriously, and to make the goals of our democracy enacted in the everyday lives of the children and families. And then there's the equity argument, which is really so firmly grounded in the reality that there is no playing field. Inequality and quality schooling persist. And then I'm going to just close with a kind of personal anecdote. When our children were younger, we would buy clothes like everyone else for them. And sometimes we would try to get ahead of ourselves by buying them things in anticipation for what they would need. And then at the end of the school year, we would figure out which things could be used, and almost none of what we had bought had been used. It could be used for the next year. And that's because our children were growing. And each year, they brought a different set of physical needs, emotional needs, and cognitive needs. The idea of a one-time gift is always a great thing. People are advantaged by that gift. But we need something that is sustained, that the city of Philadelphia can look forward to receiving from us every year, because the needs will change. The priorities must change. And I am very committed to this idea of pilots, because I believe that it can contribute in such a meaningful way to a sense of it will help to remove the sense of fear around some issues, and it will allocate to our school district and to the children and families whom we have attempted to study and to serve in many ways, a belief that the University of Pennsylvania understands that these children and families matter, and they matter both in where we place them physically, and they matter in the ways that we will try to make a difference for them.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I want to ask Gerald to unmute himself.
Great. I just want to thank, first and foremost, the press for being here during this release. And also, it's an honor to be speaking alongside my wonderful colleagues at Penn. And I just have a few things, to echo and add to the comments that were already made. Just quickly about myself, I was a school teacher for 10 years in very under-resourced contexts. I'm well aware of the challenges that so many educators are going through in Philadelphia. And for the past 10 years in my scholarship, I've been doing community-based research alongside families and youth as they explore issues of educational equity and access. And if I have one overall message, I think it would be that the well-being and the health and the quality education of our young people in Philadelphia and students in the district really needs to be the moral compass that guides so many city decisions, but also the decisions of wealthy nonprofits such as University of Pennsylvania, and specifically with respect to this issue of pilots. And my colleagues already alluded to really the very deep and entrenched injustices that are in the school system right now. By some estimates, and I've learned this from the press, it's going to cost roughly $75 million to make schools lead-free, another $40 million to remove asbestos. I think 6 schools were shuttered because of the asbestos. And these are just some of the more egregious things that we've heard about, but there's so many other challenges that our young people and educators face. Everything from really unconscionable counselor to student ratios. By some estimations, it's 1 counselor to 400 students. There's schools that have no nurses. There's schools that have rodent infestations. There are overcrowded classrooms that very much lead to teacher burnout. And they're slashing enrichment programs, rotating electives. so much. And it's just, we cannot take these inequities as a given anymore. That's not tenable. We have to do something about it. And pilots would be a significant step in that direction. One of the things I also want to mention is, despite all the challenges that the district faces, Penn still needs the district. I've been at the Graduate School of Education for a long time, and teachers and students have always welcomed Penn students into their classrooms and generously shared their precious, precious time and knowledge. And they help us fulfill our mission to train teachers in the Graduate School of Education. And it's not just GSC. There's all sorts of outreach with all the schools, and with all the units at Penn to the School District of Philadelphia. Even now, during this pandemic, we have Penn students who are joining, despite all the stressors of online teaching and learning. Teachers and educators and students are still welcoming Penn students in, so that they can fulfill their academic responsibilities. So Penn for Pilots it's about supporting the school district, as Vivian mentioned, really reinforcing the idea that we're all in this together, that we're all interconnected. But it's also very much about Penn really living up, to its own, fulfilling its own potential, its own ethical, its own moral potential, and better aligning its material wealth with the needs of the city, which really has created the conditions for it to thrive over the years. I might also add that, there are really negative multiplier effects by not paying pilots, right? By not paying pilots, we are going to exacerbate already deeply entrenched inequities and educational and health disparities. So it's time to do something about it. I have to, quickly conclude my brief comments that, I was a student at Penn. I'm a faculty member at Penn. I really believe in Penn's research and teaching mission. I'm so proud of many of my colleagues who have developed meaningful relationships with schools and with community-based organizations. But Penn's educational mission really needs to reverberate to every corner of the city. At Penn, we have always prided ourselves. We have prided ourselves that we may have differences, but we believe in dialogue. We believe in dialogue based on evidence. We believe in democratic deliberation. And that's why, the board's silence on this issue is puzzling to me. And it's also very concerning to me. But there is an opportunity to change that. We have the upcoming meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. Hopefully they'll make a decision to take this pilots issue seriously because, like I said, this is really about so many members of the Penn community, over 1,000 and counting. This is unprecedented from, I haven't, we're so much in our own worlds as faculty and staff, just trying to make it through the day, concerned with our own research, that over 1,000, faculty and staff, have signed this petition really means that this is something that is very, very important, for our community.
I just underline the obvious point that while the COVID-19 crisis has posed challenges to Penn, the challenges that it's posed to public education in this city are far more vast, and they come, as Gerald and Vivian stressed, under circumstances in which the schools were facing tremendous challenges already. So if we're asking what our highest educational priorities should be now, it's very clear where the greatest needs are.
I just want to also just remind us that with something that I write a lot in grants, proposals that I write and in other pieces of work, and that is that we are sitting in the poorest of the largest cities in the country. And every time I write it, I say to myself, I wish this were not true. I wish I could say that we have moved the needle. And of course I can't, but I see progress being made on so many fronts. But the issues around risk, that almost half of the children under the age of 5 or 6 in the city are exposed to 2 or more risk, I think is not an unimportant matter. I think the racial injustice that can be found in almost any dimension of our lives cannot be ignored. And these are issues that affect us. As Gerald noted, think about our neighbors, the people who allow us to do that work because they either are a part of our research projects or because they are the service workers who support us in one way or another. It is not an inconsequential amount, but it is not an overwhelming amount of money to be able to just make some difference that, as I said before, the city can count on. That children and families, particularly those who are the most vulnerable in marginalized communities throughout the city, and there are many, and many of these communities surround Penn, but they exist elsewhere throughout the city, that we are making our statement, that we're staking a claim that we are going to take up these issues in a more meaningful way. And that in addition to our talk and our stated commitment, that we will take this on, once again, as an annual effort, as something that can move us forward, and that can ensure that children are exposed to safe, intellectually stimulating, and openly creative sites for learning.
In the 25 years since I've been here, Penn has become more successful in raising funds, and the endowment has grown. We now are an institution with a very large endowment, $14.7 billion. And it's in that context that we ask our institution to shoulder more responsibility. And as Vivian says, to make that responsibility not something that's presented to the city as charity, but rather something that reflects stable, predictable payments. Children in the city, like children in the suburbs, need access to quality education. Because property taxes are such a significant proportion of the local money that goes into resources, as long as a wealthy nonprofit like the University of Pennsylvania, which is the wealthiest nonprofit property owner in the city, is not paying its fair share, that difference is shouldered by other property owners in the city, many of whom are small businesses or are poor. Susan says, I have been writing about this issue for a number of years. Here's a story, I wrote about this in 2013. The board's response has not changed. I'm wondering what might be different about this time, and do you have any indication that the board could reconsider? I'm going to start with this, and if anybody would like to join me, please do. One of the things I want to stress is that we are on this call because they have not responded to us. So we cannot claim special knowledge about their desire to reconsider. But we do know that they have never before been invited to this kind of dialogue by so many staff and faculty who, remember, we live here and we care passionately about the city. So that is different. That makes this time different. It's also important to recognize that it's not just a difference at the level of staff and faculty at the university who care and are mobilized in a new way. It's also that across this country, we are seeing a generation that is mobilized to try to change the inequities we have inherited, including the level of racial injustice that our generation has inherited, and we have a responsibility to undo. Philadelphia is a place where that is really felt. And it was felt this summer very acutely.
Pilots is absolutely consonant with the spirit and urgencies of the times. This is very much a matter of racial justice and, reckoning with our collective histories and our collective past. And Penn really has an opportunity to actually take a leadership role.
I just add that I'm not at all sure that the university is prepared to reconsider its views on this issue at this time. I just think it's imperative that Penn and other leading institutions of higher education recognize that we're at a critical juncture, that it's both true that the higher education sector has lost a lot of the support it's traditionally enjoyed, and it's also true that public education in many of our cities is facing tremendous challenges. Both these trends are coming together to mean that higher education has to reconsider its role and priorities if it's going to get support and if it's going to deserve support in the future. And Penn is in one of the most prominent positions as an affluent institution in the poorest city, in a big city in America. We can embrace a leading role that will add to Penn's eminence. We may not be prepared to do so now, but if so, we'll be part of a larger educational system facing decline.
You know, this is a pivotal moment in many ways. Whether it's the loss of jobs, whether it's that folks are unable to buy food and are in food lines, many people are suffering. They were suffering before, and now that suffering has been exacerbated. I think this is a time when the university can say where it really stands. What we have seen in the past few months is that people are saying we are not going to tolerate life as it has been. For those of us who work with the commitment to making a difference, for those of us who are moving along with conscience, for those of us who can just observe the pain that we see around us, and for those of us who believe that we actually as an institution have something to offer, I think now is a propitious moment to take up this issue. And without being too trite here, it's really a matter of if not now, then when? And if not us, you know, who will take this up?
Yes, thank you. I wanted only to add that we depend on the Board of Trustees to guide the institution through a difficult political moment, which means responding to the challenge of the moment. A failure to respond will hurt the institution.